It was cold that afternoon. Rain fell slowly from the gray sky. People hurried across the streets with umbrellas, trying not to get wet. Malik walked slowly on the sidewalk. His coat was old, torn at the sleeves. His shoes were full of holes. His face looked tired but calm. He reached a small grocery store and stepped inside. The warm air hit his face. He was cold and hungry. He had just one goal: buy a sandwich and leave. As he walked down the aisle, people stared at him. A woman, holding a shopping basket, pulled her child closer. Another man turned his back and walked away quickly. Malik didn't react. He was used to the looks. He went to the deli counter and looked at the sandwiches. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a few folded bills. He had just enough money. Behind the counter, the young cashier noticed Malik's clothes. She leaned toward the store manager and whispered something. The manager looked up and nodded. He picked up the phone and made a call. Malik didn't hear what was said. He picked a sandwich and walked toward the counter to pay. Just then, a white customer near the door shouted loudly, "Hey, I think he's stealing something." Everyone turned toward Malik. He froze. "I didn't take anything," Malik said, holding the sandwich and the money clearly in his hand. But no one listened. 2 police officers rushed in through the front door. One was short and bald, the other was tall with cold eyes. They walked straight to Malik. "You," the tall officer barked. "Step outside." Malik looked confused. "Sir, I didn't do anything, I just—" "Don't talk back," the short officer shouted. Before Malik could explain, both officers grabbed his arms. The sandwich fell to the floor. His money scattered. "Wait, I didn't—" He tried again. They dragged him through the door. People inside just watched. Some whispered. A few looked down in shame. No one helped. Outside, the officers pushed him against the wall. Malik's voice was calm, but his eyes were full of sadness. "Why are you doing this?" "You fit the description," the officer said. "What description?" Malik asked. The officer didn't answer. A few people had gathered outside now. A teenager pulled out his phone and started recording. Another woman muttered, "That man didn't do anything." But the officers didn't stop. Malik didn't fight. He stayed still. Then slowly he spoke. "I think you're making a mistake," he said softly. "Oh yeah?" The tall cop laughed. "What do you know about the law?" Malik looked at him. His eyes were calm but strong. Then from his old backpack he carefully pulled out a worn brown folder. The officers stopped. He opened the folder and took out a paper. It was a law license. Official, signed, and real. His name was clear. Malik Johnson, attorney at law. The people around gasped. The teenager recording zoomed in on the paper. "You're a lawyer?" the short officer asked, stepping back. "Yes," Malik replied, standing tall. "I passed the bar 12 years ago. I have worked in civil rights law, and today I came here for a sandwich." The officers were silent. The manager stepped outside. He looked pale. I didn't know," he said. "You didn't ask," Malik replied. His voice was still calm. More people were gathering. More phones were recording. One woman shouted, "You judged him by his clothes." Another said, "This man needs to sue all of you." Malik looked around. His hands were shaking slightly, but he stood straight. He put the license back in his folder. Then he said one quiet sentence. "You don't have to wear a suit to know your rights." The tall officer looked away. The short one opened his mouth to speak, then closed it. Malik picked up his money from the ground and slowly walked back toward the store. No one stopped him this time. People moved aside. The same people who looked down on him moments ago now looked at him with shock and guilt. The video of Malik's arrest quickly went viral. Within hours, it was all over social media. The image of the police dragging a quiet, homeless-looking black man out of the store sparked anger. Across the city, thousands of comments flooded the post. Some people stood by the officers saying they were just doing their job. Others were furious. They posted, "This man was treated unfairly." This is what we talk about when we say black men are targeted. Many questioned Malik's background, but no one knew the truth. The police had not even checked his identification or asked questions before the arrest, and now everyone was watching. The next morning, news outlets were talking about Malik. The local news anchors, looking serious, read from their scripts. Today, a video went viral showing a homeless black man being detained by police in a local grocery store. What made this story more shocking is that, according to sources, the man is actually a trained human rights lawyer. His name is Malik Johnson. People started digging into his past. They found old news stories, interviews, and articles about a rising star in civil rights law. Malik had been a top lawyer, known for his work helping those who had been mistreated by the system. He'd been on television, speaking out against police brutality and injustice. But then 5 years ago, everything changed. Malik disappeared from the public eye. No one knew where he went, and his friends lost contact with him. It was a mystery that no one could explain. Some news reports said Malik left his career after a case went horribly wrong. The case was about a young boy, a victim of police violence. Despite Malik's best efforts, the boy had been killed during a protest. Malik blamed himself for not being able to save him. It was a loss that hit him hard, and he seemed to vanish from the legal world without a trace. But why was he now living on the streets? Why was he wearing old, torn clothes when he was once one of the most respected lawyers in the country? People couldn't stop talking. Was he hiding from his past? Did he lose everything after that tragic case? Or had he become disillusioned with the justice system? Some even speculated he had gone mad. Others thought it was just a sad story of a man who couldn't handle the pressure anymore. But there was one thing everyone agreed on. This was more than just a simple case of a homeless man being mistreated. That afternoon, Malik sat quietly in his small apartment, watching the news reports about himself. He didn't feel angry. He didn't feel sad either. It was all just a reminder of the world he had left behind. But the one thing he knew was that the city had seen him now. The truth about him had been exposed. A knock at his door interrupted his thoughts. He opened it, and standing there was a young woman holding a microphone. "Mr. Johnson, I'm Karen Brooks with Channel 9 News," she said. "We've been trying to get in touch with you. Can we speak for a few minutes?" Malik hesitated, then stepped aside and allowed her in. They sat down at his kitchen table. Karen wasted no time. "Why did you leave your career as a lawyer? Why are you living like this?" she asked, her voice soft but firm. Malik took a deep breath. "I had to step away. The world didn't want to listen to people like me anymore. I was tired of fighting against a system that never seemed to change. And after the case with that young boy, I couldn't keep pretending things would get better. I left because I couldn't find peace in it anymore." Karen looked down at her notepad, pausing before she spoke again. "So is it true you're helping the homeless now?" Malik nodded slowly. "Yes, I've spent the last few years doing what I can. I help people who have been forgotten by the system. They deserve a voice too." "But you're still a lawyer," she said. "You still have that power." He looked at her, his eyes filled with a quiet strength. "I never stopped being a lawyer. I just stopped using the system the way I used to. I'm doing things differently now." Before Karen could ask more questions, there was another knock at the door. Malik excused himself and went to open it. This time it wasn't a reporter. It was a woman with a clipboard in hand. She introduced herself as a lawyer from the city council. "I heard about what happened yesterday," she said. "I think it's time we sat down and talked about what needs to change in this city. You've already shown us what's broken. We need your help." Malik raised an eyebrow. He had spent years fighting the system. Had he finally earned the chance to fix it from the inside? Malik stood at the door, looking at the woman from the city council. She was holding a clipboard, her face serious but hopeful. Malik glanced. Back at his apartment, the place he had called home for the past few years. It was small and sparse, filled with just the essentials. He didn't need much. But today, he needed to make a choice. The woman named Rebecca had come with an offer. An invitation. An invitation to work with the city council to create real change. To help bring justice for people like him. people who had been forgotten, ignored, or mistreated by the system. "Malik, we know your background," she said. "We've seen the video. We know who you are, what you've done. We need someone who understands what it's like to be on the other side, to be ignored and pushed down." Malik folded his arms, thinking carefully. It wasn't that simple. He had spent years working in a system that was designed to protect the powerful, and when he left, it was because he had seen too much pain, too much loss. But now, this city councilwoman was offering him a chance to fix what was broken. Could he trust the system again? Could he even bring himself to believe it could change? Rebecca must have sensed his hesitation. "I know you're thinking about the past," she said softly. "I know it's hard, but think about the future. You have the knowledge, the experience. You can be a voice for people who've never had one." Malik's eyes wandered to the window, where the rain was still falling. It was the same as it had been yesterday, the day before, and the day before that. The city had never changed. The system had never changed. But something inside him stirred, a thought he hadn't entertained in years. What if he could be part of the change? What if he could make a real difference, not just for himself, but for everyone who had been treated the way he had? He turned back to Rebecca. "What's your plan?" "We want to address the issue of police misconduct, homelessness, and inequality, and we want you to lead the charge. We want to make sure that people like you, people who have lived through it, have a real seat at the table." Malik took a deep breath. The offer was tempting, but it came with a price. It meant going back into the world he had left behind. It meant standing up against a system that might never truly change. And it meant exposing himself once again, risking everything he had worked so hard to distance himself from. Rebecca's voice broke through his thoughts. "We need you, Malik. You know the law. You know how to fight for people who don't have a voice. This could be your chance to fix what's been broken for so long." Malik stood in silence for a moment, his fingers tapping lightly against the doorframe. His mind raced with questions. Could he really go back to being the person he once was? Could he really use his skills to help others without losing himself again? But as he looked at Rebecca's earnest expression, he knew he couldn't walk away. This wasn't about him anymore. This was about everyone who had been dragged through. The dirt, about everyone who had been treated like they didn't matter. He could make a difference. He had to try. "I'll do it," he said, his voice steady but with a hint of uncertainty. "I'll help you." Rebecca's eyes brightened. "Thank you. You don't know how much this means." Malik nodded, but inside his thoughts were still heavy. The road ahead would be hard, and he wasn't sure where it would lead. But for the first time in years, he felt a small spark of hope. Malik's life began to change quickly. He attended meetings with city officials, media personnel, and even police officers. Every conversation was a mix of hope and tension. The council wanted Malik's insight, his legal mind, and his experience. But he couldn't shake the feeling that he was walking into a storm. The city had heard his story, and now they were waiting for him to fix what had been broken. But Malik knew it wasn't going to be that simple. The system he was up against had years of history behind it. It was strong, stubborn, and didn't like being challenged. In his first meeting with the council, Malik was asked to address police reform. They showed him statistics, reports, and cases of misconduct. He felt a mix of anger and disbelief as he scanned through the papers. The stories of innocent lives destroyed, of families torn apart. It all felt too familiar. "There's so much we need to do," Malik said, his voice low but firm. "But the first step is accountability. The system is broken because no one is held responsible for their actions. We need to start with transparency. We need to show the public that we're serious about change." The council members nodded, but Malik could tell that some of them weren't fully convinced. They were all eager for change, but not everyone was ready to make the tough decisions. One afternoon, Malik met with one of the police officers who had been involved in his public arrest. Officer Ryan Clark was sitting across from him, his arms crossed, looking uncomfortable. "I know this can't be easy," Ryan said, his voice quieter than usual. But I'm here to listen. You have the ear of the council now. They're serious about making changes. We need to find a way forward. Malik leaned forward, his eyes meeting Ryan's. You don't understand, do you? It's not just about listening. It's about understanding why people are angry. It's about fixing what's wrong at the root. You can't just show up and apologize. You have to change the way you act, the way you see people who don't look like you. Ryan shifted uncomfortably. I know I made a mistake that day. I don't need you to remind me. But I'm telling you we can do better. We just need to work together. Malik didn't respond immediately. Instead, he looked out the window, watching the city go by. He thought back to that day in the store, when the officers had dragged him outside, thinking he was just another homeless man. He had tried to explain who he was, but no one listened. That moment had changed everything for him. It had opened his eyes to the fact that people like him would never get the same treatment as others. It didn't matter how educated he was, or how many degrees he held. In the eyes of some, he would always be the other. I'll work with you, but only if you understand this. You can't fix things with just words, Malik finally said. You need to act. You need to take real steps to show that you care about the people who are treated unfairly. Ryan nodded, though Malik wasn't sure if he truly understood. He wasn't sure if anyone in the room fully understood. That night, Malik sat alone in his apartment, the weight of his decision pressing down on him. Was this the right choice? He had spent so many years fighting against a system that never seemed to change, and now he was supposed to work with that same system to fix it. As he sat in the quiet of his apartment, the silence felt heavy. He thought about the people who had been hurt by the system, the ones who had never had a voice. Could he be the one to change their fate? Or was he just another person who would get lost in the system? Days turned into weeks. Malik kept working with the city council, trying to push for the changes he believed in. But with each passing meeting, the weight of the task ahead grew heavier. The public's attention was starting to fade, and the city's leaders seemed more focused on keeping the peace than actually making real change. Then one morning, everything seemed to fall apart. The news broke. Another police officer had been caught on video using excessive force during an arrest. This time, the victim wasn't a black man on the streets. It was a young black woman, just 18 years old, thrown to the ground in front of a crowd for simply speaking out at a protest. The video went viral. People were angry. The protests began, filling the streets with voices calling for justice. Malik watched the footage on his phone, his stomach turning. It was just like that day in the store, just like the moment when his own life had been turned upside down. He felt a fire rising in him. This was the moment he had been waiting for. This was the breaking point. Malik called Rebecca from the city council, his voice sharp. This is it. We can't ignore this anymore. The people are angry and we need to act. We can't sit in these meetings and talk about change. We need to do something now. Rebecca's voice was urgent. I know, Malik. The council's talking about it, but I'm not sure they understand the full picture. You're the only one who can push them to act. Malik slammed his fist on the table. He had been patient for so long, waiting for others to do what was right. But now he realized he couldn't wait anymore. The time for talking was over. He stood up, grabbed his coat, and walked out the door. He needed to make a statement, a bold one that would force the city to listen. As he walked through the rain, Malik's mind raced with plans. He knew he was taking a huge risk. Going public could destroy everything he had worked for. But there was no turning back now. The truth had to come out. When Malik arrived at the protest, it was already packed with people. The air was thick with anger, hope, and fear. He stood at the back watching the crowd grow. There was shouting, chanting, and signs demanding justice. But Malik didn't speak yet. He stood quietly, taking it all in. Then, as the crowd became more restless, Malik stepped forward. He raised his hand, and the crowd fell silent. The tension in the air was palpable. Everyone was waiting for someone to lead, to tell them what to do next. People want change. We want justice. Malik's voice rang out, strong and clear. But the people in power are not going to give it to us unless we force them to listen. He paused, his gaze sweeping over the crowd. He could see the fear, in their eyes the uncertainty. But he also saw the resolve, the fire. They were ready to fight. It's time to show them we won't back down. It's time to stand up and demand accountability. We are not just statistics. We are people, and we have rights. The crowd erupted into cheers, chanting in unison. Malik felt the energy of the people surging through him, pushing him forward. He had done it. He had sparked the fire that would fuel the movement. But as the cheers grew louder, Malik knew the battle had just begun. The system would push back. The powerful would fight to keep control. He wasn't sure if he could win this war. But for the first time in years, he felt that he was no longer alone. The days after Malik's speech were like a whirlwind. News stations covered the protests. Social media exploded with support, and city officials found themselves under pressure to act. For Malik, it was both overwhelming and exhilarating, but he knew this wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. He was called into more meetings. News reporters wanted interviews. The pressure was building. He felt the weight of the city's expectations on his shoulders, and it was heavier than any legal case he had ever fought. But with each passing day, Malik's resolve only grew stronger. He had fought his whole life to be heard, to be seen as a man of integrity, not just a homeless black man. And now, for the first time, it felt like the world was finally listening. Then, the call came. It was late at night. Malik had just finished reading through some legal files when his phone buzzed. It was Rebecca from the city council. "Malik," she said, her voice shaking. "They want to meet with you. The mayor, the police chief, the council. They want to make a deal." Malik's heart raced. A deal? What do they want? They're offering reform. They'll implement changes in the police department, but they want you to back off the protests. They want you to let the system work its way through. Malik paused, thinking. The council was trying to calm things down. They wanted to avoid any further unrest, to stop the pressure from mounting. "They want me to stop pushing," Malik said quietly, more to himself than to Rebecca. "They think they can just make a few changes and make everything go away." Rebecca's voice was cautious. "Malik, I'm telling you, this could be your chance. You've pushed them to the edge. If you back down now, we might actually see some real change, but if you keep going, the battle could get even worse." Malik didn't answer right away. His mind was racing. The city had made him an offer. They were trying to control the narrative. But Malik knew that this wasn't just about a deal. It was about power, about who had the authority to make the decisions. And he knew that if he took the deal, he might never get another chance to make the kind of change that was needed. "No," Malik said finally. "I can't back down now. The people have already made their voices heard. The fight is far from over." He hung up the phone and looked out the window, watching the city. Lights flicker in the distance. The rain had stopped, but the air still felt thick with tension. The next day, Malik showed up at City Hall for the meeting. The room was full of the city's top officials, and the air was thick with uncertainty. The mayor stood up first, speaking, in a calm, measured tone. "Mr. Malik, we appreciate your passion and the attention you've brought to these issues. We are committed to reforming the police department and implementing new policies to ensure better treatment of our citizens. But we ask for your cooperation in bringing an end to the protests. We believe we are moving in the right direction." Malik stood, his voice strong. "With all due respect, the system you've built isn't broken because of a few bad apples. It's broken because it was never built to treat all people fairly. The reforms you're offering are only a start, but they're not enough." These room went silent. Malik could see the surprise in their eyes. They had expected him to negotiate. Instead, he was pushing back harder than ever before. "I won't stop until real, lasting change happens. Until this city is held accountable for its actions. Until every person, no matter their color or background, is treated the same way. You can't just pay lip service to justice. You have to show it." For a moment, the mayor and the police chief exchanged glances. Malik could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on him. Would they cave to the pressure? Would they try to silence him again? But then something surprising happened. The mayor nodded. "You're right," he said quietly. "We have a lot of work to do, and we can't do it without your help." Malik couldn't believe it. They were admitting it. They were willing to make real change. The room remained silent for a few moments before Malik finally spoke again. "We're going to need more than just promises. We're going to need a plan, a real one, and I'm going to be here to make sure it happens."